The gun was inches from Camille's face, her hands raised in the cold night air as Officer Maddox's finger hovered near the trigger. She had identified herself as a federal director, followed every protocol. Yet here she stood one wrong move away from becoming a headline. And just when it seemed the silence would end in gunfire, a voice cut through the dark. "I'm recording this. Step away from her." The highway stretched for miles, cutting through the Texas plains under a velvet sky dusted with stars. The hum of tires on asphalt and the soft rhythm of jazz playing through the car's speakers were the only sounds in Camille Armonroe's world as she steered her sleek black government-issued sedan down I-27. It was past midnight, but she was wide awake, her mind still replaying the classified briefing she had just left in Lubbock. Being the newly appointed Director of National Counterterrorism Strategy didn't come with normal hours or predictable days. But that was fine. Camille thrived in high-stakes environments. She had spent her life navigating power corridors, briefing presidents, coordinating agencies, and staying composed in chaos. What she hadn't expected, what hadn't even crossed her mind, was the sudden flash of red and blue in her rearview mirror. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel, but only slightly. She glanced down exactly 65. No swerves, no traffic, no infractions. She flicked her blinker and smoothly pulled onto the shoulder, breathing through her nose, calm and measured. Years in federal service taught her that appearances mattered, and hers now poised, confident, professional, might be her best defense. Still, something in her gut stirred as the patrol cruiser rolled to a stop behind her. It wasn't nerves, it was instinct. She adjusted her mirror, trying to get a look at the officer. No rush to exit. Too much time passing. That was the first sign. When the door finally opened, a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, posture, rigid movements, sharp. He didn't walk, he stalked. His left hand hovered near his belt, right swinging a flashlight with exaggerated purpose. Camille pressed the button to lower her window, both hands visible on the wheel. "Evening, officer," she said, voice level. The light hit her face, too long, too close, as if it was meant to intimidate. "License and registration," he said flatly. No greeting, no explanation. Camille didn't blink. "May I ask the reason for the stop?" she asked calmly. The officer didn't answer. His name tag read Maddox. His gum chewed like punctuation. "License. Registration," he repeated. Camille moved slowly. "I'm reaching for my purse on the passenger seat," she said, narrating her every move. She retrieved her wallet and held out her driver's license along with her federal credentials. Her badge gleamed under the beam. Maddox looked down briefly, then back at her. His face remained blank. "Federal, huh, yes," she replied. "Director Monroe, National Counterterrorism Strategy. Is there a problem?" A long pause. "Step out of the vehicle." The words weren't shouted, but they landed like a slap. "Excuse me, step out." His hand moved closer to his holster. The tension thickened in the air, wrapping around her ribs like a vice. Camille's heart rate didn't spike, but her thoughts quickened. She had read reports like this, seen footage of encounters that escalated in seconds. She knew the rules and how often they didn't matter. "Officer Maddox," she said slowly, "I have identified myself. There's been no violation. I'd like to know on what grounds I'm being detained." No answer. Just another step closer. The flashlight now aimed directly at her eyes. "I don't have to explain myself to you." "Actually," she said, her tone sharpened by quiet authority, "you do." His jaw flexed. "Lady, I don't care who you work for." Her pulse stayed steady, but inside a fire sparked. Not fear, clarity. Maddox didn't see her. Not really. He saw a black woman alone in a car on a dark highway. That was enough for him to assert control. But he had picked the wrong woman tonight. Then came the crack of knuckles on metal. Maddox slammed his hand against the roof of her car, the sound ricocheting across the empty stretch of road. "I said, get out." Camille glanced once more at his name tag. Brent Maddox. She would not forget it. She itched to grab her phone, but she knew better. Any sudden move would be bait. So she locked eyes with him, expression unshaken. "You're making a mistake." "No," Maddox muttered. "The mistake was thinking you could pull rank." She saw it then, the shift in his stance, the twitch of his hand. He was considering his next move, and it wasn't going to be words. The unmistakable dread of escalation settled in her bones just as a second set of headlights appeared behind the cruiser. Another squad car. Backup. But not the kind she could trust. The second officer, younger, bulkier, approached casually and positioned himself beside Maddox without a glance toward her. No questions? No assessment? Problem here, he asked. Maddox didn't even look at him, just dealing with a non-compliant driver. Camille took a deep breath. She was boxed in now. The new officer Klein, according to his jacket, looked at her like she was a suspect, not a citizen. Ma'am, he said, step out of the vehicle. Not Director Monroe, just ma'am. The chill in the air wasn't from the night. It was the realization that this was rehearsed, reflexive, a pattern. Camille weighed her options. If she moved too fast, it would be spun as aggression. If she resisted, it would be called obstruction. There was no safe path, only the one that kept her breathing. Slowly, she reached for the door handle, narrating again. My right hand is moving to the door. Maddox stepped back an inch, but his posture remained hostile. As she opened the door and stepped into the cold night, she felt the power dynamic clamp down. Klein flanked her left side. Maddox loomed at her right, both carefully positioned to block any dash cam view. Turn around, Maddox barked. You haven't told me why I'm being detained, she replied. Suspicious behavior, such as refusing to comply. Her fists clenched at her sides. That phrase, it was a setup, a trap she had seen too many times in internal reviews. Then, without warning, Maddox grabbed her wrist rough, too tight. She reacted instinctively, shifting just enough to avoid escalation, but not retreat. Get your hands off me, she commanded. Klein stepped in close now. We got a problem. I think she's resisting, Maddox said coldly. Camille's stomach turned. She saw where this was headed. She was seconds away from being labeled a threat. And then Maddox reached for his holster. The snap popped open. The gun came up barrel inches from her face. Time slowed. Her training kicked in. Hands up, voice calm, posture still. Everything about her radiated control, but inside fury boiled. This wasn't enforcement. This was humiliation, Maddox sneered. You feel powerful now. She didn't answer. Not yet. Because this wasn't over. This was the edge. And Camille Monroe didn't fall. She waited for a break. A moment. An opening. Because even surrounded by danger, she knew the one thing that still could flip the script wasn't power. It was proof. And it was coming. The barrel of the gun hovered inches from Camille's face. And for a moment the world narrowed to the faint hum of the engine behind her, and the heat of Officer Maddox's breath heavy and sharp in the cold night air. Her palms stayed raised, her stance immobile, not from fear, but from training. Every cell in her body screamed to move, to act, to disarm, but instinct and discipline held her still. One wrong move and she'd become exactly what they wanted her to be. Another incident blurred by body cam failure. Another name footnoted in a report no one would read. Maddox's finger twitched near the trigger, his jaw clenched tight with the arrogance of someone who believed he was untouchable. Behind her, Officer Klein shifted the silence, stretching, thin, suffocating. The second officer's hand hovered near his own belt, and Camille felt it like a shift in barometric pressure. She wasn't surrounded by lawmen anymore. She was surrounded by danger masquerading as authority. Maddox leaned in, eyes gleaming with something darker than anger. You think this badge means you're above the law, he hissed. Camille didn't flinch. No, she replied, voice low but razor sharp. I think it means you're supposed to follow it. The tension snapped like a taut wire. Maddox's nostrils flared. His hand flexed on the grip. And then it came. A voice sudden and sharp, cutting across the night like a siren. I'm recording this. Step away from her. The words landed like a hammer. All three froze. The sound had come from the side of the highway, off to the right past the ditch. Camille's peripheral vision caught the glow of a phone screen and the silhouette of a man standing just beyond the tree line. He held the phone high, the red record light blazing like a beacon. I said, step back, officer. I've got the whole thing, the man repeated louder, now voice steady. Maddox's posture faltered ever so slightly. The gun didn't drop, but the conviction behind it cracked. Klein turned his head toward the voice, visibly thrown. That moment of doubt, Camille took it. You're being filmed. If you pull that trigger, you won't just lose your job. You'll lose your freedom. Her words were calm, but loaded with authority. This isn't your back alley. This is a federal-level disaster in progress, and you are the reason it'll make national headlines by morning. Maddox still didn't lower the gun. His eyes flicked between Camille and the bystander, weighing something calculating. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Then, as if summoned by fate itself, the rising wail of sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder, closer, undeniable. Backup was coming, but for whom Camille stood motionless, her breath slow controlled. "You've got about 30 seconds to decide what kind of man you are," she said evenly, eyes fixed on Maddox. "You can de-escalate right now, or you can face the full weight of the government you just threatened." The sirens were close now, flashing lights rounding the bend behind them. Maddox stepped back half an inch. The gun dropped a few degrees, not down, not safe, but no longer locked on her head. The second officer took a step toward the man recording. Camille's voice snapped like a whip. "Touch him, and I will personally file obstruction of justice and civil rights violations against both of you. On camera, in front of 5 witnesses." The second officer froze. His hand dropped from his belt. The bystander kept his phone up, unwavering. "They're here," he said calmly. "They're almost here." The flashing lights cascaded over them as 3 squad cars skidded to a stop behind the scene. The night suddenly awash in red and blue chaos. Doors flew open. Uniformed officers spilled out, hands near their holsters, but weapons holstered for now. They didn't know what they were walking into. Camille didn't move, not yet. She watched their faces as they scanned the scene, her hands raised, Maddox's gun, still drawn, Klein standing stiff. Then one officer stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Wait, Director Monroe." The recognition hit like a thunderclap. Maddox didn't respond. Klein blinked, visibly thrown. "Yes," Camille answered, lowering her hands with slow, deliberate precision. "Director Camille Monroe, I am the head of National Counterterrorism Strategy. These 2 officers detained me without cause, drew a weapon on me, and attempted to escalate force despite full federal identification." Her voice echoed over the wind. "They ignored protocol, and they are being recorded." The officer who recognized her, a lieutenant judging by his stripes, stiffened. "Director, are you safe at the moment?" she said, eyes still locked on Maddox, but only because someone had the courage to bear witness. The lieutenant turned to Maddox. "Holster your weapon, now." Maddox hesitated for a beat too long. Then slowly, reluctantly, he slid the gun back into its holster. But his face was pure resentment, like a man cheated out of something he thought he owned. Camille took a step forward, shoulders squared. "Lieutenant, I want these officers detained immediately." Klein's eyes widened. "What? Wait, this is a misunderstanding." "No," she said coldly. "It's misconduct, and it ends now." The lieutenant didn't argue. "Detain them both," he ordered. Officers moved in. Maddox scoffed, stepping back. "You've got to be kidding me." Camille didn't flinch. "You threatened the director of a federal agency with a firearm. On camera. Do you really think I'm joking?" The cuffs clicked. First, Maddox's jaw clenched and trembling with rage. Then Klein, pale and silent, his badge looking suddenly small and meaningless. Camille turned to the lieutenant. "Secure their vehicles. I want their dash cam footage, body cam data, and every dispatch record from the last hour preserved. Chain of custody starts now." The lieutenant nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The bystander finally stepped closer, phone still rolling. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Camille met his eyes and nodded once. "Thanks to you." He nodded back. "They do this all the time," he said, "but not usually to someone with power." That landed, harder than she expected, because he was right. This wasn't new. She just happened to be someone who could do something about it. She turned back toward the cluster of patrol cars, the officers still processing what had happened. "Lieutenant," she said, voice steel, "now I want internal affairs informed within the hour, and I will be contacting the Department of Justice personally. I will not allow this to be buried." "Understood, Director," he said, standing straighter. "Will cooperate fully." "Good," she said, "because if even one frame of that footage disappears, I will treat this as a coordinated cover-up." Maddox twisted in the cuffs, snarling. "This is insane." Camille didn't even look at him. "No, this is justice catching up." As the squad cars prepared to transport the 2 disgraced officers, the witness finally stopped recording. "They'll try to twist this," he said. "They always do." Camille nodded. "Let them try. This time we have the truth on film. And with that, the night shifted. From danger to accountability. From silence to exposure. She wasn't done, not by a long shot, but for the first time that night, Camille allowed herself to breathe. Not because she was safe, but because they weren't anymore. The cuffs had barely clicked shut around Officer Maddox's wrists when the weight of what had just occurred began rippling through the ranks of uniforms standing along the shoulder of I-27. Camille R. Monroe watched silently as the man who only moments ago pointed a weapon at her was now being led toward a squad car. His arrogance quickly replaced by something else, disbelief, panic rage buried beneath a paper-thin mask of indifference. Officer Trevor Klein followed without resistance, his eyes downcast face, pale the gravity of the moment, having already broken through whatever loyalty had once bound him to Maddox's abuse of power. The night air felt heavier now, not from fear, but from consequence. For the first time since those red and blue lights had flashed in her rearview mirror, Camille allowed her breath to deepen. But she knew this was only the beginning. As the detaining officers secured Maddox and Klein inside separate vehicles, the bystander who had recorded the entire confrontation stood just outside the cone of headlights, phone still in hand though now lowered. He met Camille's eyes and gave a small nod, not seeking validation, but offering solidarity. She returned the gesture with a simple, "Thank you," then turned her attention back to the lieutenant who had ordered the arrests. "Lieutenant," she said, her voice calm but commanding, "I want every second of body cam and dash cam footage secured. Chain of custody begins now. Any tampering, any data loss, intentional or not, will be investigated by the Justice Department directly." "Understood, Director Monroe." He replied, the tension in his posture betraying just how far outside normal protocol this night had already gone. "I'll contact Internal Affairs immediately." "Good. And I want full access to both of their disciplinary records before sunrise. That might require departmental clearance. Then start waking people up." The edge in her voice wasn't born of anger but resolve. This wasn't about embarrassment or vengeance. It was about exposure, accountability, change. And she wasn't going to let the momentum die in the shadows of bureaucratic delay. Officers scrambled to secure evidence. One removed the dash cam units from Maddox's cruiser. Another collected radio logs and dispatched timestamps. The scene became a flurry of activity, no longer under the control of two abusive patrolmen, but now in the hands of an agency suddenly aware of who they had just tried to victimize. By the time Camille slid back into her own vehicle, she wasn't thinking about the confrontation anymore. She was thinking about what came next. The sun had barely begun to rise when the video hit the internet. The bystander had wasted no time. The footage, nearly 7 minutes long, showed everything. The aggressive posture, the drawn weapon, the clear credentials ignored the arrival of backup, the moment of recognition, and finally the arrests. It spread across platforms like wildfire. Federal director threatened at gunpoint during traffic stop. Caught on camera power race and abuse on Texas highway. Justice has a name, and tonight it's Camille Monroe. By 10:00 a.m., Camille was in her Washington, D.C. office fielding calls from DOJ representatives, senators, civil rights organizations, and media outlets, all demanding statements, action, clarity. Her face appeared on every major network. News anchors repeated her name with a mix of disbelief and reverence. What shocked the public wasn't just the incident, it was who it had happened to. If it could happen to someone like her with power, prestige, and federal clearance, what hope did ordinary citizens have? Camille made no public comment that morning. Instead, she drafted a letter internal first directed to the Department of Justice and the Office of the Inspector General. In it, she outlined the events of the night in clinical detail, attached links to the footage, and included a formal request for a comprehensive review of patrol operations, complaint procedures, and officer accountability in the state of Texas. She demanded a deep dive into Maddox and Klein's records. She wanted to know how many complaints had been filed against them, how many had been quietly dismissed, how many stories had ended in silence, because there wasn't a witness with a phone and a willingness to speak. The response was swift. By noon, the DOJ held a press conference. They confirmed an investigation had been launched into the conduct of Officers Maddox and Klein. Officer Maddox was officially terminated pending criminal charges, including assault with a deadly weapon and deprivation of rights under color of law. Officer Klein was placed on indefinite unpaid suspension pending further inquiry. The department issued a public apology scripted, polished careful, but Camille knew better than to find comfort in statements. Words didn't fix systems. Action did. That evening, Camille sat alone in her office, the city skyline dimming outside her window, when her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She answered without hesitation. Director Monroe, a pause. Then the same voice from the night before. This is the guy who recorded everything. Just wanted to say, I appreciate what you did. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the sincerity in his voice anchor her. Most people wouldn't have stepped in, she said. Most people can't, he replied. But you did. You could. And you did. Camille leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. Most people don't have the power to, she said quietly. But I do. And I won't waste it. There was a pause on the other end. Not silence, just respect. If you ever need the footage for court for anything, it's yours. Thank you. Truly. After the call ended, she sat in stillness, not reflecting on fear or what might have been, but on what was now possible. The conversation, the confrontation, the camera, none of it had been planned, but together they had revealed a truth too many people tried to deny. This wasn't just about a traffic stop gone wrong. This was about a culture of unchecked power, one that cloaked itself in protocol, but functioned on fear, one that demanded obedience and punished identity. She wasn't going to let this go, not when so many others had been silenced, not when she now had the national spotlight, the leverage, the momentum. Camille began drafting another document, not a report this time, but a proposal, a new initiative aimed at mandatory federal oversight of local departments with high patterns of complaints and low rates of disciplinary action. It would start as a pilot program, but it wouldn't end there. Because what happened to her had happened to countless others. The difference, now the nation had seen it unfold live. Camille would make sure they didn't look away. Not this time. Not ever again. In the quiet darkness of that Texas highway, what started as an ordinary drive turned into a confrontation that exposed a harsh truth. Power can be abused when accountability is absent, and even those at the highest levels of government are not immune to injustice. Camille R. Monroe, a decorated federal official, followed every protocol, remained calm, presented her credentials, yet she was still treated with suspicion, aggression, and nearly became another tragic headline. The only reason she didn't, someone had the courage to witness, to record, to speak up. The lesson here is twofold. First, authority must never be confused with impunity. Law enforcement holds incredible power, but that power comes with responsibility, and the moment it is used to intimidate or silence, rather than protect, it becomes a threat, not a service. Second, and perhaps more importantly, every voice matters. The bystander who held up his phone didn't wear a badge or hold a title, but his presence shifted everything. His courage brought truth into the light and halted what could have ended in irreversible tragedy. Too often people believe they have no influence unless they hold a position of power. But the truth is, power takes many forms. Sometimes it looks like a title behind a desk, and sometimes it's just a phone held steady by someone who refuses to look away. Justice begins not only in courtrooms, but in the small moments where someone chooses to say, "Not this time." To our listeners, let this story remind you that silence is never neutral. Whether you are a witness to discrimination, a victim of unjust treatment, or someone in a position to speak out, your actions can change the outcome. Stand firm, know your rights, and never underestimate the difference you can make. At U.S. Instructive Stories, we share these real hard-hitting accounts not to shock you, but to awaken you. We believe that by shining a light on injustice, we give others the courage to speak, to act, and to push for a better, more accountable America. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, and for caring. If this story moved you, we encourage you to share it. Let others know that no one is above the law, but no one should be beneath its protection either. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's make sure justice doesn't depend on who's watching, but that someone is always watching. We appreciate you being part of this journey. Stay informed, stay empowered, and as always, thank you for being with us here at U.S. Instructive Stories.